Welcome to Production Pioneers. Today's guest is Trevor Barnum, CEO of Azotherm Safety, a company redefining personalized safety in environments ranging from job sites to racetracks. Trevor, your leadership in advancing safety solutions has been inspiring. That's why I look to you to do this podcast today. I'm looking forward to your insights. Can you give us a little bit about how you got started and how Azotherm came about?
Well, I appreciate you having me on, Kevin. It's always exciting to talk with thought leaders like yourself. So Azotherm, we're young on purpose, right? We're young. We've been doing this since 2023. This all started with identifying an issue, at a racetrack. And so my background is in healthcare. And so I work at a racetrack in life safety there. And I've been doing that for a little while and realized there wasn't a great glove that did everything that we needed it to do when we're out there on the track. And so I set out to design and manufacture one, and that's how everything got started. From there, we've grown and expanded into industrial safety and workwear, and even within the past year, we've come back and really started to refocus on the motorsport industry. We're really excited about that. The industrial and construction safety stuff is still a huge part of what we do, but we're trying to figure out what the right balance is with both. Unfortunately, they're sort of tied together as the economy goes, so we're navigating some of those headwinds as well. So that's sort of the elevator pitch, but it's been an exciting journey thus far.
Oh, nice. Azotherm emphasizes a safety-first mindset. When did that core vision materialize for you and your team? What sparked that commitment?
Sort of the core of what we do, right? We're built around safety, and there wouldn't be this company without identifying a need for a really sort of niche and specific thing that is something that not a lot of folks were doing at the time and still aren't. We've since expanded that because having sort of a pigeonhole in a business in 2025 is tough. But as we've expanded, we've seen a lot of good growth and revenue production with that too. So, but safety is everything we do.
Well, you positioned Azotherm against the too big to care safety companies. What were the key problems with one-size-fits-all safety approaches that made you believe personalized portfolio is a better way?
Well, I think you hear, we won't name names, but you hear and what's publicly available about how contracts are written for some of these larger groups that supply folks that will lock you in for some amount of time. Folks don't need or want that. And so we offer alternatives to the big guys while we still tap into the supply lines that the same big guys have. And so we use a network of very robust distributors along with personal relationships with smaller brands and even bigger brands too that allow us to provide pricing that's competitive and service that's even more competitive, right? And you don't need pushy salesmen. You just need somebody who understands what you do and who does it every day versus some 24-year-old who just graduated business school who may not understand what you do on a day-to-day basis and what you need. They're just trying to push stuff. And so that's sort of how we've marketed ourselves is let's talk about what's required, what's necessary, and how we can work together to get you where you need to be within the constraints that you have.
Nice. Describe how you create customized safety solutions for a client, whether it's in construction or let's say a derby team. What's the assessment and delivery process look like?
It takes a lot of work. It's a lot of work. And because we offer such a broad sort of range of products in the portfolio, it takes expertise of multiple folks. And so I lead that still. We're small enough that I still lead that. And say for like a derby team, it may be a promoting group who needs fire extinguishers and gloves for folks, vests. We can provide all that. Same thing. We have one roofing client who's incredible. They've worked with us for some time now, where we can provide their fall protection, their safety gloves, and so it's really a one-stop shop, and that's what we've aimed to be. Is if you need it, we can provide it for you. So it's there's not we're not, like I said, we're not big enough to have a portal. You don't need to go shopping online. You can talk to somebody, be like, hey, this is a picture of something that I saw on the job site. It looked like it worked really well for this guy. Can you get us that? I'm like, yeah, man, I got you. And so,
Right.
so some of that stuff you just don't get from pushing buttons on a portal.
Right. So you're featuring products from other small innovators like Slickman welding gloves. How do you approach partnerships and product selection to align with Azotherm's values?
Yeah, I think it's all about getting to know folks, and if you can see and trust their vision, you know that's what your customers have come to expect. Is that if they have trust in you, and you have to be able to say, hey, I've talked with these folks, I've evaluated these products, and if I'm going to sell it to you, it's going to have my sort of unofficial or official stamp of approval on it. And so, because that's at the end of the day, when you're small, that's all you've got is your name. And so if you shell out a bunch of stuff that doesn't work, it's not going to be useful.
Right.
You won't make it far.
So you're investing in educational content, things like harness safety and OSHA updates. How important is communicating expertise as part of your client relationships? I would imagine that's a big deal.
Yeah, I'm a fall competent person. And so we try and speak the language, right? We can't be experts in everything, but you try and speak the language and at least understand what the technical regulations are and how those apply to the folks that you're speaking to. And that will allow you to really hone in on what's necessary, especially as they go from job site to job site. Some people are more residential focused and they're like, well, we don't need hard hats and all this other stuff. But then you end up on commercial sites, or in some states they have different regulations or roofs that are a certain height. Then you start to need specific safety gear, and sometimes they'll rely on us for that. Sometimes they'll know it, but that's all part of being able to talk to somebody and have that personal relationship with the customer.
I didn't have this in my questions, but I'm curious: have you ever run into a customer that really didn't understand the new rules or the rules, and you had to convince them that you really need to do this?
That that does happen. I would say in motorsport, we do a lot of education around what's required and what the ratings and stuff mean. There's the world of an industry and construction nowadays is so tightly governed and it's so conglomerated that when you're in a commercial or industrial setting, most of those things are given to you. They'll give the subs, hey, you need cut A4 gloves, you need a Type 2 Class E hard hat, stuff like that. Whereas in motorsport, from series to series, there will be different regulations about, hey, I need a Hans device, or can it just be a donut? Do I need SFI1 or SFI5 fire suit? So those types of things I find end up having. I talk to people more in motorsport about that, whereas in the construction world, they're usually told, hey, this is what we need. And sometimes we'll help out with, yeah, this is a good idea or not. But we're designed to be able to help with all that.
Nice. What are some of the toughest challenges you're facing currently? Tariffs, hiring, supply chain issues, and
I
how
would
do you keep?
say,
Go ahead.
in general that things have slowed down a tremendous amount. I mean, I joke with folks all the time, but people are poor. And, that not just consumers, but projects are slow or people are waiting. If there are projects that are being done, they're really large projects, and those by the big guys. Some of that will be borne out in the coming months and years. But I would say that things in general are just slow. Tariffs, especially with the de minimis going away, the de minimis exemption going away. We import high performance fabrics, and our initial glove, the Azo Shield 211, that is the version 2 is on hold right now because those are made overseas. Cut and sew places in the United States are few and far between and require exceptionally large orders. A lot of times they don't have the equipment that you need to do some of the intricate work, especially in gloves, which I found. And I spoke with a group maybe a few months ago when we knew that these tariffs were coming, and I was like,
Stateside, you mean?
Stateside, yeah. I
Yeah.
talked to a place in the U.S. and they were like, well, we don't have the machine to do that. You could buy us a $25,000 machine and we'd be happy to. And that's just not it's not where we're at. And so, it's truly that the infrastructure just doesn't exist here to do things that we need to do. And so, that's sort of been our onus to diversify, is because of the way the trade landscape has evolved. And so we've had a tremendous issue with supply, even from our suppliers, especially in the motorsport world, because fire resistant fabrics, for the most part, are not manufactured in the United States and
Can I ask where they're mainly manufactured?
Asia. Yeah, and it has to do with some of it's the environmental regulations, some of it's the volume, the trouble. I'm not privy to all this, the secrets of it, but what I've been explained is that the trouble is the environmental regulations in the U.S. and how some of the
Chemicals.
precursors exist that are required to make some of these fabrics. There's one that's very commonly used in even things like movie set drapes, in fire suits, all sorts of fire resistant fabrics is monocrylic. And that's almost exclusively made in Asia, and that even has a DoD exemption, to where when you contract with the government, so much, depending on the item, so much of it has to be made, produced, and finished in the United States. But monocrylic has an exemption because it's just not made here. And so, the trade complexities are profound, and that has really been an onus for us to, again, diversify and find new suppliers, truthfully, because some of it has been a real sort of struggle to be able to find new opportunities.
Yeah. So you got a couple issues. Not only do you have the tariffs, acquiring new business has been tough. What's been the most successful channels for you in finding and winning new business?
I would say, we've done a good amount with social media. There's, some novel platforms out there that aren't the Meta, the Facebook, Instagram. There's Trade Hounds, TikTok, LinkedIn. You find some of those sort of less big platforms that are more accessible. The Meta platforms are really tight on how they allow you to communicate with other people, and so that's challenging. But a lot of it is word of mouth, and that is the least efficient way to grow. But so far has been the most steady, and we're always looking to find new ways to reach people. We've tried, the postcards and whatever. A lot of that is just challenging. It's really challenging with the marketing now. To get something with a ROAS that makes sense in a budget that we have. If you have, a $10 million marketing budget, yeah, you can afford to, test 20 different ads, at $1,000 a day. But that just doesn't make sense for somebody like us. And so you have to be efficient. And we've worked with different, groups to help tease some of that out. But we're still getting there.
What remains the biggest headache in customer acquisition? I think you kind of nailed it, but it's finding them. Is it the ideal customer profile and identifying them and getting to them? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. So the goal was to be able to talk to anyone and be able to acquire them as a customer, right? If I go every single residential or commercial construction, asphalt, plumbing, electrical group in the country, we have what they need, right? But this is a red ocean market, and so there's 15 other guys like me, probably within a 50-mile radius. There's all the big guys that, Fastenal, Granger, Cintas, all the big guys. And you have to show what's different, right? And that's and the start of that battle is to get in front of the right person,
Right.
and that is a lot of times the biggest challenge because these are a lot of times small businesses. These trade folks in the skilled trades, they're small businesses. Um, they know a guy that they get their stuff from, or it's they get it from the big guy and
Or
they're
looking for
locked
the
into a
cheapest
contract.
price or that kind of
Yeah,
thing.
and we can compete on price, and we do, but
Well, I think you certainly have an identifiable benefit that I think is huge. It just needs to be exposed.
yeah, and that's the thing is that we if I can get in front of the right person, we'll be fine. It's just a matter of having that FaceTime because I can supply what they need and do it with the right customer service, with the right timing, at the right price that makes sense for everybody.
Sure. All right, I'm going to get off of sales for a little bit. Safety standards are evolving. How does Azotherm stay nimble enough to keep clients ahead of regulations, even as a small, specialized team that you are?
You know, we I just came back from FabTech. Go to trade shows. We do all the seminars. All of the suppliers will send out as new regulations come out with their new products that they want, to get out there. They'll send us, hey, this is the new Type 2 safety helmet rating, or this is the new, gas monitor standard. This is, stuff like that. And so there's lots of those seminars, education stuff. Um, I'm OSHA 10 certified, and so as new stuff comes out, there's lots of different media for us to consume to be able to stay up with that. Um, when the new NEC comes out, we pick that up. So try and stay ahead of stuff so that we can stay relevant.
Okay. Artificial intelligence. It's a buzzword that's happening today. How is artificial intelligence changing your industry? How are you currently using it or planning on using it in your operations, product development, client safety, sales, marketing, that kind of thing? Any
Yeah,
roadblocks that are or opportunities you're most excited about in this?
I think to be seen. I'm not. We use it for some of the marketing stuff.
I can like what?
Image development, script development. It runs some of the ads type thing. So the basic stuff, but that's not. I don't think that's what you're asking, right? That's like basic type stuff. I think at
Well,
the end,
vision? Can you see it somehow impacting your business or your marketplace for that matter?
I people ask this all the time, and I just I don't know. I think it's such a
I get that answer all the time
yeah,
too.
it's just, it's like, what is AI? Well, everybody's trying to sell their version of it, but what does it do, right? And at the end of the day, it is not going to run a power line. It's not going to change your pipes. You know what I mean? It's not going to switch out the breakers, right? And and I struggle with what it does for me on an everyday basis. And so, there's all sorts of like call bots that can like answer calls and like, sales bots where you can have them place outgoing calls and then when someone's talking, they can like pick up but that all costs money. And the benefit, the return on that is just not clear because a lot of these companies are new. They're just using GPT as their LLM and they build off that. And so they're basically all the same. They have, all of the same sort of restrictions and difficulties that each other have. And so it's hard to know exactly what to do with them. They're very expensive. And I just don't know. I just don't know what I would use it for right now, other than some of the stuff that we are. So I'm not sold yet. I'm not sold yet. And I think until people are always like, "Oh, you got to be ahead. That's how you got to get ahead and whatever else and being small, you got to get ahead." of it somehow, and I just don't know what that looks like. And as someone who's doesn't have an unlimited budget, you want to be thoughtful and conservative with what you're going to spend money on,
Sure.
because that's money I can't use to bring new product on. I can't hire people, and so I'm just not sure. I don't know what to do with it.
Yeah. I touched on it a little bit earlier, but thank you. That was a good answer and very honest. I appreciate that. Is there hiring issues? That's another buzz thing I run into. Have you found when it comes to hiring people that there's issues there and trying to get people to work and
I don't hire a lot of people, truthfully. I'd like to, but we're a family-owned group, and that's mostly what we do now. I think in the future we'll see what that ends up looking like, but I just don't have a sense right now of what that looks like.
Okay. All right, let's talk a bit about metrics. What signals or metrics do you monitor closely to gauge progress, success as you grow? Obviously, P&L means a lot, but there might be other metrics or markers.
I think acquisitions per month is something that we use.
Can you identify that? What do you mean by that?
Like
Sales?
new customer acquisitions per month, because we don't have minimums, right? And so there's some groups that are like, oh, we only look at net revenue, and that's obviously something we look at, but something we look at is how many new people are we talking to, because that's, like I said, that's how we grow, word of mouth, and so that's really the biggest thing is revenue, and how many new people we're bringing on, right?
Right.
And that will, that may evolve as we get larger, but there's just, right now it's the bottom line that, that's what we need to look at and what makes sense.
Awesome. For emerging leaders in this business to business safety world, what's probably the most important lesson in building a mission driven company that you'd like to share?
I will quote one of my buddies who we still work together, and helps me with the marketing stuff. Is nobody wants your stuff, and
say that again. Nobody
wants your stuff, and you have to tell them. You have to sell them on the story, right? You have to sell them on the story of the problem that you're solving, and because they've been living their life this whole time without it just fine. And so especially when you bring new products to market, you have to sell them on the solution. And that's the biggest thing, is that you can have this great idea in your head, but if no one knows about the solution or the problem, then you're just in an echo chamber. And right. So that would be sort of the biggest thing. And that it's hard. It's slow. This is slow. Business is hard. Everything's been done at this point, right? There's not a lot of novel solutions out there to problems. And so you have to find a way to set yourself apart. And I guess the last thing would be that it's also not cheap. So when you start, everything is going to cost 2-3 times what you think it is.
That's true. That's true. All right. I don't want to keep you long because this is a podcast. I want to keep people interested. So, Trevor, thanks so much for sharing your insights. It's inspiring to see Azotherm blend innovation, care, and technology to serve such a critical field. I truly appreciate your candor and your leadership. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kevin.
All right. Have a good day.
Take care.